Somebody get Grandpa off the range before he hurts himself. The laughter that followed was sharp, dismissive, the kind that cuts without leaving visible wounds. Staff Sergeant Dylan Mercer didn't even look up from his spotting scope as he said it. The old man standing at the edge of the shooting platform wasn't worth the attention. 80 years old if he was a day, wearing a faded canvas jacket that might have been green once, khaki pants worn thin at the knees, and a baseball cap so weathered the logo had long since surrendered to time. He'd wandered in from somewhere, probably lost, probably confused, definitely not belonging anywhere near the Marine Corps Scout Sniper School at Quantico. What happened next would prove just how wrong assumptions can be, and just how much wisdom hides behind weathered faces and trembling hands. If you believe that respect must be earned, not assumed, type steady in the comments before continuing. The morning had begun like any other at the Urban Sniper Training Facility. October 2021, crisp Virginia air carrying the sharp crack of rifle fire across manicured ranges. 24 students, the latest class of aspiring scout snipers, were 3 weeks into the most demanding marksmanship program in the United States military. They'd already lost 6 candidates to the brutal attrition rate. Those who remained believed themselves elite. They had reason to believe it. Every man on that range had qualified expert with multiple weapon systems. Every man had survived infantry training, reconnaissance indoctrination, and the preliminary selection that weeded out 90% of applicants before the school even began. They were young, strong, confident, perhaps too confident. Master Sergeant Vincent Rowe, Chief Instructor, had seen that confidence before, seen it in hundreds of young Marines who arrived believing marksmanship was about strength and aggression, about fast reflexes and iron will. Most of them learned eventually that the rifle doesn't care about muscle. The rifle cares about stillness, about breath, about the infinitesimal space between heartbeats where the body achieves something close to death, so that the shot can achieve something close to perfection. Rowe was running the stability drill that morning, the exercise that broke more candidates than any other. The concept was simple. Hold your rifle in firing position, crosshairs centered on a quarter-sized target at 200 meters, without wavering more than 1 minute of angle. Hold it for as long as possible. The current class record was 11 minutes, set by a former competitive shooter who'd nearly made the Olympic biathlon team. Most candidates started trembling by the 3-minute mark. "Lane 1, ready," Rowe called out. "Mercer, you're up." Staff Sergeant Mercer moved to the prone position with practiced efficiency. At 28, he was one of the older candidates, already a veteran of 2 deployments, decorated for actions in Helmand Province. He was also the class leader, the one the others looked to for guidance, and he had a mouth that never stopped running. "Watch and learn, gentlemen," Mercer announced, settling behind his M40A6 rifle. "I'm about to show you what stability actually looks like." He pressed his cheek to the stock, eye finding the scope, body melting into the firing position. His breathing slowed, his heartbeat steadied. The crosshairs found the target and held. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3. The barrel remained steady, a testament to his training and natural ability. Around the 4-minute mark, the first tremor appeared. Barely visible, just a slight waver at the edge of the scope's field of view. Mercer compensated, adjusting his position, fighting the fatigue beginning to seep into his muscles. 5 minutes. 6. "Breathing's getting ragged," Rowe observed, watching through his own spotting scope. "Core's starting to fail." Mercer's jaw tightened. He could feel it too, the burn spreading through his shoulders, his arms, the small muscles of his hands that suddenly seemed inadequate for the simple task of holding still. 7 minutes. 8. At 8 minutes and 43 seconds the barrel dropped. Mercer exhaled sharply, rolling onto his back. 8:43, Rowe announced. "Respectable, not remarkable." Mercer sat up, frustration evident on his face. "The rifle's heavy. Nobody can hold perfect stability beyond a certain point. It's just physics." "Is it?" Rowe's voice carried a note of something Mercer couldn't identify. "Or is it something else entirely?" That's when Mercer noticed the old man. He'd appeared at some point during the drill, standing at the edge of the concrete platform, watching with those pale blue eyes that seemed to see everything and nothing at the same time. His hands, spotted with age, hung loosely at his sides. A slight tremor was visible in his fingers, the kind that comes with 8 decades of living. "Can we help you, sir?" Rowe asked, and there was something in his tone that the students didn't catch. A note of recognition, perhaps, or anticipation. The old man's voice was like gravel over sand. Just watching. Used to do some shooting myself long time ago. Mercer laughed. That same dismissive sound from before. Yeah? What did you shoot? Tin cans in your backyard? A few of the other candidates snickered. The old man didn't react. His eyes simply moved to Mercer, held there for a moment, then returned to the range. Something like that. Sir, this is a restricted training area, one of the students said, not unkindly. You really shouldn't be here without authorization. He has authorization. The voice came from behind them. Everyone turned to see Colonel Patricia Hayes, commanding officer of the Scout Sniper School, striding toward the platform. Her presence alone was enough to snap every student to attention. At ease, Hayes said, but her eyes were on the old man. Mr. Castellano, I wasn't expecting you until this afternoon. The name triggered something in Rowe's expression, a subtle shift that the students were too junior to interpret. He straightened slightly, as if the air itself had changed. Came early, the old man said. Couldn't sleep. Figured I'd watch the young ones train. Castellano, Mercer said, still oblivious. That's a familiar name. You related to someone who served? Hayes's eyes cut to Mercer with an expression that could have frozen water. Staff Sergeant, perhaps you'd like to return to your lane and prepare for another attempt. Actually, the old man said, and there was a quiet authority in his voice now that hadn't been there before. I'd like to see more of this stability drill if the Colonel permits. Hayes hesitated for just a moment. Of course, Master Sergeant Rowe. Please continue the evaluation. The drill proceeded. One by one, candidates took their positions, fought against the weight of the rifle, the burn of fatigued muscles, the impossible demand of perfect stillness. Times ranged from 4 minutes to just over 9. Nobody approached the class record. Nobody came close to what the instructors called operational stability, the ability to hold position long enough for a real-world shot in combat conditions. Throughout it all, the old man watched, silent, still, those trembling hands clasped behind his back now, hiding whatever weakness they might betray. That's everyone, Rowe announced after the final candidate completed his attempt. Results will be posted this evening. Remember, stability is not about strength. It's about efficiency. It's about understanding what your body needs to do and eliminating everything else. Master Sergeant, the old man said, stepping forward. Mind if I try? The range went silent. Mercer actually laughed out loud, a bark of disbelief that echoed off the concrete barriers. You? Sir, no offence, but that rifle weighs 14 pounds. It's not exactly a hunting piece. Dillon. Hayes's voice was ice. Mercer fell silent, but his expression remained sceptical. The old man turned to Colonel Hayes. Just for old times' sake, ma'am, if you don't mind. Hayes's face was unreadable, but something flickered in her eyes. Master Sergeant Rowe, please set up lane 1 for Mr. Castellano. Rowe moved with unusual care, positioning the M40A6, checking the scope, laying out the shooting mat as if preparing for a ceremony rather than a simple drill. The old man removed his jacket, revealing a plain white undershirt beneath. His arms were thin, the muscles that had once corded them long since faded to sinew and memory. The tremor in his hands was more visible now. Several students exchanged glances. This was going to be embarrassing, possibly dangerous, definitely inappropriate. The old man lowered himself to the prone position with surprising fluidity, a motion that seemed almost rehearsed, muscles remembering patterns from decades past. He settled behind the rifle, and something changed. It was subtle at first, a shift in his breathing, a settling of his frame. The trembling hands that had been so visible moments before steadied as they found the familiar contours of the weapon. His cheek pressed to the stock. His eye found the scope. Time starts on your ready, Rowe said softly. Ready. The word was barely a whisper, but it carried certainty. Rowe started his stopwatch. What followed would become legend at Quantico, spoken of in hushed tones by instructors for years to come, used as an example in training sessions long after everyone present had moved on to other posts, other careers, other lives. The old man held the rifle perfectly still, not mostly still, not impressively still for his age, perfectly still. The crosshairs visible on the instructor's monitoring scope remained centered on the target with mechanical precision. 1 minute, 2, 3. The barrel didn't waver. 4 minutes, 5, 6. No tremor, No adjustment, no sign of fatigue. Mercer's jaw had dropped somewhere around the 4-minute mark. By minute 7, he'd closed it and simply stared, unable to process what he was seeing. "How's he doing that?" someone whispered. "Shut up," Rowe responded, but his own voice was strained. 8 minutes passed, then 9, then 10. The old man's breathing remained slow and even, so quiet it was nearly inaudible. His body had become an extension of the rifle, or perhaps the rifle had become an extension of his body. The distinction seemed meaningless. 11 minutes. The class record fell without ceremony. 12, 13. At 15 minutes, Colonel Hayes spoke quietly into her radio. Within moments, other instructors began appearing at the range, drawn by word that something unprecedented was happening. 17 minutes. 18. The old man showed no sign of stopping, no sign of strain, no sign that he was doing anything more demanding than lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for sleep to come. 19 minutes. 20. "Time," Rowe called out, his voice cracking slightly. 20 minutes even. The old man remained in position for another long moment, as if reluctant to release the connection. Then, slowly, with the same fluid motion he'd used to descend, he rose from the shooting mat. His hands, now separated from the rifle, resumed their subtle trembling, but his eyes were clear, bright, alive in a way they hadn't been before. The range was silent. 24 students, 6 instructors, and 1 full-bird colonel stood frozen, trying to reconcile what they'd witnessed with everything they thought they knew about age, about strength, about the limits of the human body. Mercer was the first to speak. That's not possible. Sir, how old are you?" 82 last month. "And you held a 14-pound rifle perfectly stable for 20 minutes. 20 minutes isn't that long," the old man said, and there was something almost wistful in his voice. "Used to be, I could hold position for hours, waiting for a shot that might never come, waiting for a target that might never appear. The rifle becomes part of you after enough time. You forget it has weight. You forget you have a body at all." Colonel Hayes stepped forward. "I think, Mr. Castellano, it's time these Marines learned who they're speaking with." She turned to face the assembled students. "Gentlemen, may I introduce Gunnery Sergeant Samuel Castellano, United States Marine Corps, retired, graduated from this very program in 1962, served 3 tours in Vietnam as a scout sniper with 1st Marine Division." The words hung in the air, but Hayes wasn't finished. Gunnery Sergeant Castellano holds the record for the longest confirmed kill shot in Marine Corps history for over 2 decades. 93 confirmed kills across his 3 tours, recipient of the Navy Cross, 2 Silver Stars, and 3 Bronze Stars with Combat V. He was known by his call sign throughout a corps. She paused. "Granite." The name rippled through the crowd. Even the youngest Marine present had heard of Granite, the sniper who never missed, the ghost of the Ashau Valley, the man who'd once held a position for 3 days without food or water, waiting for a single shot that would eliminate a North Vietnamese general, responsible for the deaths of an entire Marine company. "That's not possible," Mercer breathed, but his voice had lost all its earlier arrogance. Granite is a legend. They teach us about him in the first week of training." "Legends have a way of walking around when you're not expecting them," Rowe said. There was something like reverence in his voice. "Sir, I trained under Marines who trained under you. I've used your techniques for 20 years without ever knowing where they came from." Samuel Castellano, the man they'd dismissed as a confused old visitor, shifted uncomfortably. "Techniques evolve. Young Marines make them better, the way it should be." "But the stability," a student said, stepping forward. "How do you still have that kind of stability at your age? Your hands shake when you're just standing there." Samuel looked at his own hands, studying the tremor as if seeing it for the first time. "These hands have been shaking for 15 years. Nerve damage, doctors say. Too many hours in cold water, cold jungle, cold everything. Can't hold a coffee cup without spilling any more." He raised those trembling hands, let everyone see the weakness that age and service had inflicted. But when they find the rifle, they remember what they were made for. Muscle memory doesn't live in your muscles, not really. It lives deeper than that. Lives in your bones, your nerves, your soul, if you believe in such things. I've been holding rifles since I was 17 years old. 65 years. You think a little tremor can erase 65 years of holding steady? He lowered his hands. The body fails. That's what bodies do. But the training, the discipline, the hours and days and years of practice, that doesn't fail. That's always there, waiting, ready to take over when everything else gives out. That's what I tried to teach back when I was instructing. That's what these Marines should be learning now. Not how to be strong, how to be still. Strength fades. Stillness is forever. The silence that followed was profound. Mercer, the confident class leader who'd mocked an old man an hour before, looked physically ill. The colour had drained from his face, replaced by something that might have been shame, might have been awe, might have been the beginning of wisdom. "Sir," he said, and his voice cracked on the word, "I owe you an apology. What I said earlier, about the tin cans, about getting you off the range, that was—" "The response of a young man who didn't have all the information," Samuel finished for him. "I've been that young man. We all have. The question isn't whether you make mistakes in judgment. The question is what you do when you realise you've made them." He fixed Mercer with a gaze that seemed to reach across decades, across battlefields, across all the hard lessons that time inflicts on those willing to learn. "You're a good Marine. I watched you shoot. Good position, good fundamentals, strong discipline, but you're fighting the rifle instead of becoming one with it. You're using strength where you should be using acceptance. The rifle doesn't want to waver. Let it be still, and it will be still." Rowe cleared his throat. "Sir, we brought you here today to speak at the graduation ceremony next week. But I wonder, would you be willing to extend your visit? Work with this class on some of your techniques?" Samuel's eyes moved across the assembled faces. Young men, strong men, men who would go on to serve in places and situations most civilians couldn't imagine. Men who would carry rifles into darkness and come back, if they were lucky, if they were skilled, if they remembered what they were taught. "My wife used to say I couldn't stop teaching if I tried," he said quietly. "She called it my gift and my curse. She's been gone 20 years now. Sometimes I think the only way I can still hear her voice is when I'm passing on what I know." He turned to Hayes. "If the Colonel permits, I'd be honoured to work with these Marines." What followed was a week unlike any the Scout Sniper School had ever seen. Samuel Castellano arrived each morning at dawn, moving with that slow, deliberate gait of the elderly, those trembling hands wrapped around a cup of coffee he couldn't quite keep from sloshing. The students who'd once dismissed him now scrambled to assist him, to carry his equipment, to listen to every word he spoke. He taught them things that weren't in any manual. The dead stop breath, a technique for achieving complete respiratory stillness between shots. The bone stack, a method of aligning the skeletal structure to support the rifle's weight independent of muscle tension. The mind drift, a form of meditation that allowed a sniper to remain alert while completely detached from physical sensation. "Your body is a machine," he told them during one session, lying on the firing mat with an unloaded rifle, demonstrating positions that seemed impossible for a man his age. "But your mind is the operator. A skilled operator can make any machine perform beyond its specifications. An unskilled operator can destroy the finest machine ever built." He shared stories too, late in the evenings, when the formal training had ended and the students gathered around him in the common area. Stories about Vietnam, about missions that had never been declassified, targets that had shaped the course of battles, moments of terror and triumph that history had never recorded. "There was a shot," he said one night, his voice distant, "outside of Khe Sanh, July 1968. NVA Colonel, directing artillery that had been hitting our position for 3 days. Range was 1,200 metres, uphill, crosswind. I'd been in position for 41 hours. No food, no water, no movement. My spotter had taken shrapnel 12 hours earlier, and I'd had to send him back alone. I was operating on nothing but training and spite." He paused, those pale eyes seeing something far beyond the walls of the common room. "Took the shot just before dawn, watched him fall through the scope. The artillery stopped 20 minutes later, saved maybe 100 Marines, and you know what I felt?" The students leaned in, expecting triumph, glory, the satisfaction of a mission accomplished. "I felt sad," Samuel said. "Sad for the man I'd killed. Sad for his family who'd never know what happened to him. Sad for myself, for what I'd become to be able to do what I did." He looked at them, each in turn. "Don't let anyone tell you killing gets easier. It doesn't. It shouldn't. The day it gets easy is the day you've lost something you can never get back." On the final day of his visit, Samuel watched the stability drill one more time. the same exercise that had first revealed the gulf between expectation and reality. Mercer went first, as class leader. He took his position with new awareness, applying techniques he'd spent the week absorbing. His breathing found the rhythm Samuel had taught. His body found the alignment. His mind found the stillness. 12 minutes. A new personal record. He rose from the mat with tears in his eyes. One by one, the other students followed. Every single one exceeded their previous best. 3 broke the old class record. The lowest time was still 8 minutes, a full minute longer than the same student had managed a week before. When it was over, the class gathered around Samuel for the last time. Colonel Hayes stood nearby, watching. Rowe held a small wooden case in his hands. "Gunnery Sergeant Castellano," Hayes said formally, "on behalf of the Marine Corps Scout Sniper School, I want to thank you for your service. Not just the service you rendered 50 years ago, but the service you've rendered this week. The techniques you've taught will be incorporated into our official curriculum. The wisdom you've shared will be passed down through generations of snipers yet to come. Your legacy is not just the shots you took, but the shots you'll enable others to take long after we're all gone." She nodded to Rowe, who stepped forward and opened the case. Inside, resting on velvet, was a challenge coin larger than most, bearing the Scout Sniper insignia and a single word: Granite. "This is the first Master Instructor coin ever issued by this school," Hayes continued, "created specifically for this occasion, for a Marine who never stopped being a teacher, never stopped serving, even decades after hanging up the uniform." Samuel took the coin with trembling hands. For a long moment he simply stared at it, and those who watched could see the emotion moving across his weathered face like weather across a landscape. "I spent 20 years wondering if what I did mattered," he said finally, his voice rough. 20 years wondering if the killing, the waiting, the endless hours of stillness, if any of it meant anything beyond the moment. My wife, Margaret, she used to tell me the same thing she told me about teaching. She said the ripples of our actions spread further than we can see, that every life saved creates more lives, and those create more, on until the end of time. He looked at the coin, at the students, at the life that had somehow led him to this moment. I didn't believe her. Couldn't believe her. Too much darkness in my memories to see any light. But standing here now, looking at you young Marines, knowing you'll carry something of what I taught into your own service, your own lives, maybe to students of your own someday. He had to stop, gather himself. Maybe Margaret was right. Maybe the ripples do spread further than we can see, and maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all any of us can hope for. Mercer stepped forward then. The young staff sergeant who'd laughed at an old man, who'd dismissed a legend as a confused visitor, who'd learned more in 1 week than in years of formal training. He came to attention and rendered a salute so sharp, so perfect, it could have been photographed for a recruiting poster. "Thank you, Gunnery Sergeant, for everything." One by one, the other students followed. 24 salutes. 24 young warriors honouring a man who'd walked the path before them, who'd faced the darkness they would someday face, who'd found a way to carry the weight and still emerge with something to give. Samuel returned the salute, and for just a moment, those trembling hands were steady. The graduation ceremony the following week featured Samuel Castellano as the keynote speaker. He spoke for 20 minutes about duty, about sacrifice, about the terrible responsibility of holding another person's life in your hands. He spoke about the importance of humility, of recognizing that every person carries battles invisible to others. He spoke about Margaret, about the love that had sustained him through decades of nightmares and silences, about the loss that still ached every single day. But mostly, he spoke about legacy. "Every one of you will face a moment," he said, looking out at the graduating class, "when everything depends on your ability to be still. Not just physically still, mentally still, emotionally still, still in your soul, if you believe in such things. In that moment you'll draw on everything you've ever learned, everything you've ever practiced, everything you are and everything you've chosen to become." He paused. "Make sure, when that moment comes, that you've built something worth drawing on. Make sure you've filled your well deep enough that it won't run dry. Because the rifle doesn't care about excuses. The rifle only knows whether you can hold steady. And steady, my young Marines, is everything." The applause that followed shook the auditorium, but Samuel barely heard it. His eyes had found the back of the room, where a portrait hung on the wall. A young man in dress blues, serious eyes, the same jawline Samuel saw in the mirror every morning. His son, Michael, Lance Corporal, Scout Sniper, killed in Fallujah in 2004 during the Second Battle. The loss that had nearly destroyed him. The loss that Margaret had helped him survive until her own death 5 years later. The loss that he carried every single day like a rifle he could never put down. "For you, son," he whispered, so quietly no one else could hear. "Everything I do, everything I teach, everything I am, for you." 6 months after that graduation, Staff Sergeant Dylan Mercer found himself on a rooftop in Syria, covering the extraction of a diplomatic team from a compound surrounded by hostile forces. The shot he needed to make was impossible. 800 meters, night conditions, crosswind, through a window barely wider than a human head. The target was a machine gunner who'd already killed 2 Marines and was about to kill more. Mercer settled behind his rifle. He felt the weight, the familiar burden that had once seemed like an obstacle, but now, filtered through everything he'd learned, the weight became something else. An anchor, a connection, a bridge between himself and every sniper who'd ever held this position, faced this moment, found this stillness. He thought of Samuel Castellano, thought of hands that trembled with age but steadied with purpose, thought of the lesson that strength fades but stillness is forever. He found his breath, found his bone stack, found his mind drift, and in that infinite moment between heartbeats, he found his shot. The letter Mercer wrote to Samuel after returning stateside was 3 pages long. It described the shot in technical detail. It described the lives saved, the mission accomplished, the commendation received. But mostly, it described gratitude. Gratitude for a week of training that had changed everything. Gratitude for wisdom shared without reservation. Gratitude for the living example of what it meant to serve, not just during the years of active duty, but for all the years after. Samuel read the letter sitting in his favourite chair, Margaret's photo on the table beside him, Michael's folded flag on the mantel above. His hands trembled as they held the paper, but his eyes were steady, steady as granite. He passed away the following spring quietly, peacefully, in the same chair where he'd read Mercer's letter. The doctors said it was his heart finally giving out after 83 years of faithful service. But those who knew him best said different, said he'd simply decided it was time. Time to see Margaret again, time to see Michael, time to put down the rifle he'd been carrying in one form or another since he was 17 years old. His funeral was held at Quantico, in the same auditorium where he delivered his final speech. Over 1,000 people attended. Marines from every era, students he'd taught 50 years ago standing beside students he'd taught 6 months ago. Dylan Mercer delivered the eulogy. He spoke about the stability drill, about the 20 minutes that had changed everything, about an old man with trembling hands who taught him what steadiness really meant. He used to say that stillness is forever, Mercer concluded, his voice breaking only slightly. I didn't understand what he meant at first. Thought it was just technique, just training, just another skill to master. But I understand now. Stillness isn't about the body, it's about the soul. It's about finding that place inside yourself that nothing can shake, nothing can move, nothing can disturb. Gunnery Sergeant Castellano found that place. He lived in that place. And he spent his final years helping others find it too. He looked at the flag-draped casket. Rest easy, Gunny. Your watch is over. But your stillness, your legacy, your granite, that lives on in every Marine who ever had the privilege of learning from you, and it will live on, passed from teacher to student, generation to generation, for as long as Marines pick up rifles and learn to hold steady. At the graveside, after the rifle salute, after the flag had been folded and presented, after the crowd had begun to disperse, a young private approached the casket. He couldn't have been more than 19, fresh-faced, probably just beginning his training. He stood at attention for a long moment, then reached into his pocket and withdrew something small. A challenge coin. Not the Master Instructor coin that had been buried with Samuel, but a simple bronze piece bearing the Scout Sniper motto, "One shot, one kill." He placed it on the casket and whispered something that only he and the dead could hear. Then he walked away, back to the buses, back to training, back to the long road of becoming what Samuel Castellano had been. A warrior, a teacher, a bearer of stillness in a world of chaos. The wind picked up briefly, rustling through the trees of the National Cemetery. For just a moment, if you listened carefully, You might have heard something beneath it. A whisper, perhaps. A final lesson from a man who'd spent his life teaching. Hold steady, hold steady, hold steady. Today, at the Marine Corps Scout Sniper School, there's a new addition to the training facility. A bronze plaque mounted beside the entrance to the primary range. It reads, "The Castellano Range, dedicated to Gunnery Sergeant Samuel Granite, Castellano, USMC, 1939 to 2022. Strength fades, stillness is forever." Below the plaque, preserved in a glass case, rests a single item, an M40A6 rifle, positioned as if held by invisible hands, crosshairs forever centered on a target it will never need to hit. A reminder, a legacy, a lesson that transcends time. Every new class that comes through the school begins their training with the same exercise, the stability drill. And every instructor before the first student takes position tells the same story, about an 82-year-old man with trembling hands, about 20 minutes that shouldn't have been possible, about the day a legend walked onto the range and reminded everyone what it means to truly hold steady. The students listen, they learn, they carry the knowledge forward, and somewhere in that sacred space between generations, between those who served and those who will serve, the thread that connects all warriors grows a little stronger. If this story taught you that age is not weakness, that experience outweighs arrogance, that the greatest lessons come from the most unexpected teachers, then subscribe to this channel. We tell the stories of those who served in silence, who taught without seeking recognition, who proved that true strength isn't measured in muscles but in the steadiness of the soul. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And the next time you see an old veteran with trembling hands, remember Samuel Castellano. Remember Granite. Remember that those hands might just be waiting for the right moment to show you what they were made for.